Welcome to my channel. I'm Gary Wiryawan, and today we're going to talk about my favorite Micro Four Thirds zoom lenses. Let's go! Before we continue with today's video, this is just a quick reminder for you to support my small channel by liking this video, sharing this video, and subscribing to my channel down below. Thank you, and let's continue with the video. So today, really quickly, I just want to share to you my favorite Micro Four Thirds zoom lenses. So a few weeks ago, I made a video about my favorite prime lens. Now this is the zoom lens version. So as an introduction, I don't want to go into the debate about the prime versus zoom. It can get very lengthy, but I believe that each one, prime and zoom, has its own place when it comes to photography. And now because we're talking more about zoom lens, I believe that zoom has the strength when it comes to flexibility in focal lengths, alright? And it's useful for some applications of photography, especially for travel, documentation photography, and other genre of photography that requires spontaneous kind of in-the-moment kind of thing, you know. Now for this video, I will cover three categories of zoom lens. First is wide angle zoom lens, and then normal angle, and then obviously telephoto. Also, the selection of lenses in this video are my personal opinion, you know, it's my personal favorites. It's not fact, it's just something that I like, alright? And you are free to disagree, and also you are free to comment down below if you have different favorite set of lenses, alright? If you are a follower of my channel, then you might probably already know what kind of lenses that I'm into, alright? They are lenses that are relatively small, has great image quality, great versatility, and not too expensive, you know, not the kind of pro-grade kind of lens, alright? Now before we continue any further, if you wanna check out the prime lens video that I mentioned earlier, I will put it on the card above so you can check it out. And now without further ado, let's go into the actual lenses themselves, alright? Alright, the first category of zoom lens for this video is the wide angle zoom lens, alright? This will be useful for your landscape photography needs as well as for scenery photography, also for travel, because sometimes when you travel, you wanna cram up as much as possible in a single frame, and wide angle zoom lens is very useful for that. And these are my picks for my favorite wide angle zoom lens for Micro Four Thirds. My picks for wide angle Micro Four Thirds zoom lens are the Panasonic 7-14mm f4 as well as Olympus 9-18mm f4 to f5.6. Unfortunately, I no longer have the Panasonic 7-14mm f4 because I already sold it. I have other lenses that already covered its focal length and uses in my photography and video needs. However, I still have the Olympus 9-18mm and I still want to keep it for a long time. Both of these lenses, they are not pro-grade lenses, and I picked them because they are small, they are lightweight, easy to carry around, they have relatively good image quality, and they're not that expensive, which are all the criteria that I really love when it comes to Micro Four Thirds lens. If you want the absolute widest angle of the wide angle lenses in Micro Four Thirds, then the Panasonic 7-14mm is a good choice because it zooms out all the way to 7mm, which is equivalent to about 14mm in full frame. It's ultra wide angle. It is very sharp, it has great image quality, and I really enjoy using it. And if you zoom it in at 14mm, it still retains its high image quality as well. So you're covered all the way from 7 to 14, and you can use 14 for normal kind of general purpose photography, so this could potentially be the only lens that you need when you travel. However, although the Olympus 9-18mm only zooms out to 9mm, which is not as wide as the Panasonic 7mm, it goes all the way to 18mm when you zoom it in, which is, in my opinion, more flexible when compared to the Panasonic, because 18mm you start to get a little bit of bokeh even at f5.6, and you know, it's useful for kind of environmental portrait photography, food photography, that kind of stuff that requires a little bit of you know, subject isolation as well as a little bit of a separation from the background. So yeah, I much prefer the 18mm compared to 14mm of the Panasonic lens, but it's your choice, alright? If you value the wider angle, go with the Panasonic. If you value the potential to use 18mm. For more stuff than just wide angle stuff, then go with the Olympus 9 to 18mm. Next category is the normal angle zoom lens for Micro Four Thirds. Now, normal angle kind of lenses will be the majority of lenses that you will use most of the time because they cover focal length for general purpose photography, meaning your everyday kind of photography, street photography, travel photography, environmental portrait, food photography, and so on. You know, it's just so flexible and versatile. Now, my pick for this category of lenses will be your kit lens. You heard that right, your kit lens, and also the Panasonic 12 to 35mm f2.8, as well as the Panasonic 14 to 140mm f3.5 to f5.6. And you know, other lenses of similar focal length and aperture from Olympus and other different brands are also welcomed, alright? Now let's talk about kit lens. If you just purchased a new Micro Four Thirds camera from Panasonic, Olympus, or OM Digital, or whatever the name is, I'm pretty much confused about the names, by the way. Most probably, the new camera will come with a kit lens, alright? And that kit lens will usually cover a general purpose normal focal length, you know, and that will be the majority of focal lengths that you will use anyway. So if you don't need larger aperture or specific focal lengths in mind for specific application, then chances are your kit lens will be more than enough for you. So just keep your kit lens and use it and see if you need any longer focal lengths or if you need a larger aperture. If you don't, that's fine. Just keep using your kit lens, you know, practice that minimalism. However, if you come across the need to have a larger aperture for shooting in lower light condition, or if you want to do more background blur kind of thing or bokeh, then my personal favorite is this Panasonic 12 to 35mm f2.8, alright? This is a pro grade kind of lens, meaning that it's not gonna be cheap, alright? But it's also big, and you know, when compared to other Micro Four Thirds lens, this is kind of big. But when you compare it to other camera formats such as full frame or APS-C, then this, which is equal to 24 to 70mm f2.8 in full frame, you know, it's very small, alright? So I don't mind having this, alright? This is excellent because it has great image quality. The large aperture of f2.8 is quite nice, you know, it's probably more than enough for most of your lower light needs, also for your bokeh kind of needs, you know. And bonus, because this is a pro grade kind of lens, it has weather sealing, which makes it easier for you to use in, you know, harsher weather conditions such as in rain, you know, in drizzle, you know, that kind of situation, alright? And yeah, I've been using this lens a lot. This is my main YouTube lens usually. I'm not using this right now for my YouTube recording of this video. I'm using my Panasonic Leica 15mm instead. But still, this is a great lens and this will serve you a long time, alright? Now, if you don't really need larger aperture but you want more flexible focal length, then my choice for that kind of lens is this Panasonic 14 to 140mm f3.5 to f5.6, alright? So this lens is fantastic for travel because this could be the only lens that you need for travel, because it goes from 14mm, you know, a relatively normal focal length, all the way up to 140mm, which is almost ultra telephoto. So you can have, you know, scenery at 14mm, you know, environmental portrait at about 14, or maybe zoom it in a little bit at 18, and all of a sudden you see a rare eagle flying above you and you can just zoom it into 140mm and boom, you got that picture with just one lens. Alright, this is so fantastic. And image quality is also good. It's a little bit lighter when you compare it to the pro grade 12 to 35mm f2.8, and this is also not as expensive. Alright, this is a great lens if you really need that flexible focal length that you'll be able to zoom in and zoom out. Alright, the only problem with this lens, it doesn't have weather sealing, although the newer version of this Panasonic 14 to 140mm has weather sealing, and also it doesn't have large aperture. Please also check out similar lenses from other brands such as from Olympus or maybe Tamron. If you're into a third-party brand as well, they have their own versions of these two lenses, alright? And yeah, to sum it up, for larger aperture needs, especially for documentary photography, for a little bit of travel, for your general purpose photography to get a more kind of background separation from the subject background blur, I'd go with the 12 to 35mm f2.8. And for travel, when flexibility really is something that you value, I'd go for the 14 to 140mm. Now, next category for the Micro Four Thirds zoom lens of my choice will be the telephoto lens. So if you happen to choose the Panasonic 14 to 140mm from the previous category, congratulations, you can probably skip this section and go ahead to the next section. But if you don't, then there are some choices for your telephoto needs, alright? My personal pick will be the Panasonic 35 to 100mm, both the f2.8 version and the f4 to f5.6 version. So there are lots of different applications when it comes to telephoto lenses, alright? They're not just for photographing things that are far away or just for portrait, you know, they're equally as useful when it comes to landscape photography, for travel photography, you know, even for everyday kind of stuff when you can zoom it in and do a close-up kind of thing, you know, to give you a different kind of perspective. Telephoto is really useful for that. So keep that in mind, and now let's get on with the lenses themselves. First, let's talk about the Panasonic 35 to 100, the f4 to f5.6 version. Alright, this is very small, very lightweight, very easy to carry around. It has great image quality and it zooms all the way to 100mm. Alright, this is perfect when you are traveling and you want to be lightweight. You don't want to carry too much gear that will weigh you down. Alright, this is the perfect lens for that. The image quality is really good. I've been using this lens for multiple times during travel, during different kind of applications, and it has been serving me really well. Alright, the only drawback of this lens is it doesn't have weather sealing and it doesn't have large aperture. Alright, when you're talking about telephoto lens, you know, even without large aperture, you can already get some kind of bokeh already, meaning that your background will be blurred even without f2.8 or f1.8 kind of aperture, alright? So if you want bokeh, you can do it with this lens as well. But in low light, the f5.6 might not give you enough aperture to give enough light for the sensor, and that's when the 2.8 version comes in, alright? This is considerably bigger when you compare to the f5.6 version, because this is f2.8, alright? But this has weather sealing and the image quality maybe on par, but the larger aperture really makes a lot of difference, you know. When it comes to the bokeh quality, this is great, you know. This has that, kind of characteristics that everybody's looking for when it comes to telephoto lens. However, keep in mind that from my testing, there will be some swirly kind of circular pattern going on the background, especially if your background is busy and you're shooting all the way at 100mm f2.8, alright? Also, the 35 100mm f2.8 is quite expensive because obviously this is a pro grade lens. So if you don't have that kind of budget, then I'd recommend you to go for this, for the f5.6 version. So for my personal use, I use the f5.6 version for travel photography exclusively and just for general purpose kind of thing sometimes. And for my documentary photography, for my portrait photography kind of needs, for my quote-unquote more professional kind of use, I would go for the f2.8 version, alright? Also, check out Olympus. They have different kind of offerings. They have different kind of telephoto lenses as well, also with f2.8 aperture and slightly longer focal lengths. And you know, they're also great. You know, just go with the one that you're most confident with, alright? Alright, last but not least, say you already have the 35 to 100mm, but you feel that it's not long enough for your needs because you want to go to safari, photographing some wildlife, or you want to do astrophotography, photographing the moon. Alright, then the option will be ultra telephoto lens. My personal choice for ultra telephoto lens is the Panasonic 100 to 300mm f4 to f5.6. I'm sure there are Olympus versions of this lens as well. Go check it out. When it comes to ultra telephoto lens like this, extreme reach is what it's all about. This lens goes from 100mm all the way to 300mm, which is about 600mm in full frame. So this is perfect for wildlife photography, bird photography if you're into that, anything that requires extreme kind of reach, I personally haven't got the chance to use this lens too much because I don't really do that kind of stuff, wildlife photography, bird photography. I do it, sometimes, not really that much. But when I use this lens a lot is when I photograph the moon, I photograph the moon quite frequently and this lens performs really well. And you can check out the video on the card above if you want to learn more about how to photograph the moon. Speaking of the lens itself, it's sharp enough for most of my needs. It has, good enough build quality. It has a stabilizer that really works, and this is a solid performer in my book, alright? And that wraps up this video of my favorite Micro Four Thirds zoom lenses, alright? So I hope that this video has been useful for you. If you have any questions, please comment down below if you want to ask me something about any of these lenses. Also, if you have your own recommendation of zoom lens for Micro Four Thirds, please comment down below as well. Let's make it this kind of community kind of thing on the comment section so that everybody can help each other out. I might not know all about the Micro Four Thirds lenses, but we can share all together and help each other when somebody has questions. Alright, that's it for today's video, and also don't forget to support my channel by liking this video, sharing this video, and subscribing to my channel down below. Alright, thank you and goodbye.